Creativity is often seen as a gift. As a fine arts student, I romanticized artists, writers, creators for their ability to conjure something out of nothing, to bring life to ideas and visions. It led me to study painting, improving my own craft as I learned how to bring my own ideas to life. But in the process of doing that, I also realized something. The creative process is extremely terrifying. Imagine this. Pretend you're me for a second. You've been preparing to write for this video essay that you spent weeks researching. You got your notes, you got your general outline, your thesis is on point, and now it's time to put words to paper. And as you look at the computer screen, for some weird reason, your heart is just racing. The blank screen stares back at you as you realize that creativity isn't always a blessing. It comes with its own dark side. This lurking fear that the act of creation could spiral out of control, that me, the artist, could be consumed by my own work. Now, imagine how I felt in this scene.
I say no. The question, how do you run from an idea, from a thought, from a story that lives in your head? You can't escape your fears. You carry your monsters with you. The devil, the pack, it's in you. You're running right back to it. A loop. I have to stop. Stop running. Stop writing. I won't put another word. It's too dangerous. Only horror comes out of it. People get hurt. I will let the currents of this ocean wash me away. But what if I forget why I stopped? What if I forget I stopped at all? That is fucked up. If that happens, I'll start writing again.
In Alan Wake 2, this concept is the scariest thing. Much more so than the tense atmosphere and jump scares, is the fear of creativity. At the heart of Alan Wake 2 is its protagonist, Alan Wake. He's hardly your typical action hero. He's a writer, a creator. He's deeply flawed. He's an everyman. Alan Wake's success as a novelist made him famous, but that same success plunged him into a spiral of doubt, frustration, and fear. For Alan, writing is no longer a simple act of creation. It's much more complicated than that. Every word he writes in the game serves as both a lifeline and a death sentence. In Alan Wake 2, creativity isn't liberating, it's confining. Alan is trapped by his own imagination, quite literally. After all, since the events of the first game, Alan has spent the better part of 13 years fighting against the dark presence and continuously trying to write himself out of the lake. The game's world is shaped by his writing, with every paragraph, every new line, every new edit turning into a new twisted version of the world. What once started as a creative outlet now becomes an all-consuming force, one that terrifies him as much as it defines him. Alan embodies the fear that many creators face, the fear that their own work will trap them, that their creative process will become a prison. This is made very clear when you come across these series of videos that show Alan's slow descent into madness as he realizes that despite his best efforts, he's no closer to getting out of the lake than when he first dived in. He's trapped by the dark forces that hold him captive, trapped by his inability to write himself out of the lake, trapped by his overwhelming doubts as an artist, fueled by years and years of failure. This concept alone, for me, was the most frightening aspect of Alan Wake 2. In this way, this game turns creativity into a weapon, or rather a force that threatens to overwhelm its creators. Alan's imagination is not just his gift, it's quite literally his greatest enemy. He's no longer in control of his stories. Rather, his stories at this point almost control him. You can see that with the game's primary antagonist, the Dark Presence, which serves as the perfect metaphor for the fear of creativity. This malevolent force isn't a typical villain. It represents the dark, shadowy side of the creative process. It is the manifestation of everything Alan fears about his own imagination. His doubts, his insecurities, his loss of control, especially when it takes on the form of Scratch, which the dark place uses to mirror Alan as his twisted doppelganger that embodies the worst parts of himself. It is the embodiment of every creator's fear. The idea that once a work is created, it takes on a life of its own. This is done by the actions of Scratch, who literally edits the manuscript of Escape, Alan writes, thus making it even harder for Alan to ever escape, looping him again and again as Alan loses control of his own narrative. Just like how in real life, many artists often lose control of their creations once they're released into the world. This loss of control is at the core of the fear of creativity. Art, once created, can be interpreted, misused, or twisted in ways the artist never intended. The dark presence in Scratch is a reminder that creation isn't always safe. It's unpredictable, dangerous, and can consume the artist if they're not careful with it. Another terrifying aspect of Alan Wake isn't just the monsters or the darkness. It's the writer's block. For Alan, being unable to write isn't just a frustration, it's quite literally a death sentence. The game takes the idea of writer's block and amplifies it to a life-threatening ordeal. Because this was quite literally the reason Alan and his wife first came to Night Springs in the first game that set off all the events that followed. And in the sequel, Alan can be seen many times realizing the futility of his efforts as he can't seem to find the right words that will free him from his prison. He is trapped at the mercy of his creativity, which eludes him as he falls deeper and deeper into a pit of despair and doubt. For many artists, this inability to create can be a paralyzing feeling. The blank page becomes a menacing presence, and the fear of not being able to write or create is suffocating. This is a feeling that I really get, by the way, when I write. When I'm writing all of this stuff into a coherent script to show to you guys. Because writing, like any other art form, is terrifying when you don't know where to start, when you're limited by your own creativity. And this fear is quite literalized in Alan Wake 2. Alan's survival depends on his ability to write, but with every new page he completes, the horror intensifies. This looped nature of creation, where the more you create, the more pressure mounts, is central to the artist's fear of creativity, because there's always this expectation to outdo your last work, to push your creative boundaries further. And with that pressure comes the fear of failure, of losing your touch, or falling into an endless creative block. That is literally every single video essayist I know's biggest fear. One of the most fascinating aspects of Alan Wake 2 is how it blurs the lines between Alan as the writer and Alan the character within his own story. Because he's no longer just a creator. He's also the creation trapped in his own narrative. He is literally writing the story of his own life as it happens. This meta-narrative reflects the ultimate fear of creativity, that the artist can lose himself entirely within their work. And as the game progresses, it becomes increasingly difficult to tell where Alan the writer ends and Alan the character begins. The game plays with this idea brilliantly, using Alan's internal monologues and rewrites to reflect the constant revisions and self-reflection that artists go through. The more Alan rewrites his story, the deeper into the spiraling nightmare he goes. Alan Wake's journey serves as a haunting metaphor for the fear of creativity, the fear that artists, when they lose control of their own work, when their imagination spirals, when they realize that they've created something they can no longer control. The game brilliantly explores this darker side of creation, turning the artistic process into a nightmare where every idea is basically a potential threat. It's a reminder that for many creators, myself included, the act of creating is not just about inspiration and brilliance. It's about wrestling with fear, doubt, and the unknowns of your own mind. Okay, got a little dramatic there at the end. All right, to anybody who made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. And if you're new here, welcome to the channel. I hope you like what I'm making. There's other videos here on other topics if you're interested. And yeah, leave a like and subscribe if you're interested in the content and you want to support me. I'll even take a comment, you know. whatever. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. This has been Usfin Dope, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.